Hi, everybody. Nothing like being the person standing between you and beer. Let's do a little bit of housekeeping first. Normally, when I go first, I announce this at the beginning of the day, but since we're at the end of the day, we could still do this too because we have a happy hour in front of us. You all have badges that are nicely written with your names on them, and they're just kind of quietly sitting on your tum-tums right now, not doing anybody any good. So, if you want to meet new people, you could take your badge, you can actually spin it around and hang it off the back so that people who are sitting behind you can actually learn your name and then know who you are afterwards. So, fun way to meet people. That wasn't an excuse to talk or anything like that. It was just a badge. All right, let's get into it. Uh-oh. I think it's a safe assumption to say we've all seen videos like this on the internet before. Some of you can probably guess how this is going to end. Some of you may have even seen this video before. Even if you had, there still is drama here, right? Even if you've seen this video, you're like, oh my gosh. You feel bad for this girl. Her name's Abigail. I have this cool pointer. I'm going to try this. Look at that. There she is. There's a reasonable chance that she doesn't recover from this. Right? The race is effectively over for her. At some level, we as humans sometimes feel like if you stumble just once, it's kind of the end of it. My name is D'Anthony Mall, apparently. I run a design system consultancy called Super Friendly, and we've worked with and consulted with some of the most recognizable brands in the world, like United Airlines and Pfizer on their design systems. And I want to share some of the observations that I've had over the last decade of running my agency so that you can learn from them too. I'm going to highlight a couple of inquiries from prospective clients so that you can see that are a bit representative of how clients contact us and ask for help with design systems. And there's some interesting trends that kind of pop up. So back in 2014, this is the kind of inquiry that we got. Now please forgive, there's a lot of text on screen. I'll read it out. This is the inquiry that we got. It says, the subject is International Website Framework, and it says, I'm looking for the next step in where we could be. I'm looking for someone to rewrite the visual style in a way that makes it extremely modular like atomic design. I'm not interested in abandoning our original design. I want our users to see this as an evolution. And this would be for design of HTML, CSS, plus a style guide pattern library only, not implementation on our CMS, etc. I don't want to get overly detailed in this email, but is this a project that you'd be interested in discussing further? Now, in hindsight, in 2022, this is a design system project. But in 2014, we didn't really have the language. Our prospective clients didn't even have the language. They're sort of skirting around it, right? So they're saying words like style guide and pattern library and visual design and atomic design and modularity. But we didn't have that as an industry quite yet. Now, if we fast forward about 4 years later, 2018, this is the kind of inquiry that we get, not even through email. This is a DM on Twitter, all right, from a prospective client. Hey, Dan, we're forming a design systems team at my company, and I know that your company works in the space. Is there a way we can work together? Okay, much more specific, to the point, calls out design system work, right? And 4 years later, just a very specific message about design system work. A lot has happened in those 4 years, 2014 to 2018. Some of you were responsible for those things that happened in those 4 years, so thank you, and also, how dare you? 3 years later, 2021, this is in an email. The subject is design system project. We currently have a design system for the web experience, but it's of blank, but it's fragmented, and we have a number of component libraries in silos throughout the org. We're revitalizing and funding a new core systems team tasked with defining a new component library and pattern library. We would like a partner to help our core systems squad execute designing and developing the components and patterns necessary for an internal release at the end of H1 2022. We'd love adoption of the entirely new design system by Q4 2022. You'd be working directly with myself and our systems squad, 2 designers, 2 UI engineers, 1 PM, and 1 technical writer. So we'd like to be in execution mode if possible and bang out a list of defined components and patterns that amplify the brand and expressiveness of our company. Lots more specificity in 2021. Lots of design system words that we're used to seeing: component library, pattern library, core systems team, systems squad, things like that. Lots more detail around team, timeline, expectation. And just this year, 2022, design system help is a subject. Curious to know if your team helps establish design systems become better. We're in need of some help, specifically around governance. Your company popped up in the discussion because you all worked with blank and she works with us now. Is this something that your team can help with? So, if I was to sum up the differences between the kinds of inquiries that we would get in 2014 and the ones that we're getting now, about 10 years later, what I would say is in 2014, generally, most of our inquiries were like this: help us make a system. And in 2022, teams want help getting people to use that system. That's the main difference in the trend. That is 8 long years of hoping for something that is not happening. Now, the teams that reach out to us, they usually find themselves in one of 2 situations. The first one is where there's been a significant effort already put into creating infrastructure, components, Figma files, architecture, and still nobody really seems interested, or teams kind of prefer to do their own thing or build their own systems. I like to call this a design system ghost town. It is a very sad and depressing place to find yourselves. Some of you know what I mean. The second situation is where teams get even more desolate. They've given up hope. They say things like, well, we move too fast for a design system to work here, or we're too large of an organization for a design system to be really useful to us. And at these kinds of companies, you can often find stories of several times over the last couple of years where they've tried to make a design system and failed. I call these design system graveyards. Spooky. Here's the point of all this. Whether you've had a design system for years that hasn't gotten adopted, or you're starting from scratch today, this week, next week even, you can be successful. The amount of time doesn't make a difference. And it all starts with decisions that you make about your next component, which is the title of my talk today. No matter where you are in your design system journey, the decisions that you make about your next component can make all the difference. I tweeted this back in April. I said, I'm so thrilled for a design system team that I've been working with. The team formed on February 7th. Yesterday, only 61 days later, they shipped system version 1.0.0, and a feature team implemented a component, checklist item, into their code base, saying that it saved them a week of dev time. How many people have launched their design system in 60 days or less? Anybody here? This is the fastest I've ever done it. It was amazing to see and be part of, and I want to talk to you about how that happens so that you all can do it too. Maybe you're thinking something that my clients come out and ask. Oh, by the way, this team that I worked with is their 4th try on a design system in the last 4 years. Right? So it's never too late, right? So maybe you're thinking something that a lot of my clients just come out and ask me. They say like, all right, D'Anthony, you've helped hundreds of companies with their design systems. What is your process? And honestly, I think they're looking for some fancy diagram with circles and arrows that shows up when you do a Google image search for design process. You know, agencies have this, like, first we celebrate, then we congregate, then we fornicate, then we triangulate, like, blah, 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 blah. So instead, I kind of say some hand-wavy things like, well, there's about 50 things that we would do over the course of 3 to 4 months, and they go like, what kinds of things? And then I try to describe all the ways that we could do it and more in a sales call, and they get really confused. So instead, my friend Crystal Vitelli and I, we decided we would write it all down in detail one day. So Luke alluded to this earlier. That turned out to be this workbook that we made called Design System in 90 Days. I'm going to spend the rest of my time here today on stage walking through some of the steps that we have in the workbook to help you get your design system adopted as quickly as possible. If you like what you hear and you want to hear more of the steps and read more of the steps, at the end of the talk, I'll share a discount code for the workbooks just for the attendees of this conference, so don't tweet about it or anything like that. And just to make sure if you're interested that you're paying attention for that, that'll be in my last slide. Okay. So I said the next component that you tackle has a major impact, which begs the question, where do we begin? And to answer that, I'm going to share 2 quotes with you that I love to share with design system teams. The first one is from the late Dr. Actually, I don't know if he's Dr. Stephen Covey. He's an author and educator whose most popular book was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of the things that I love from this book is he says, begin with the end in mind. I love that principle. I love that quote. It's so simple, so rich. Begin each day, each task, each project, each component with a clear vision of your desired direction and destination. Okay, so how do you know what the end is, right? Where do you actually find that? So activity number 1 in the workbook is here. Assemble the North Star, right? The mission, network, strategy, and vision define the strategic direction for a business. They provide the what, the who, the how, and the why necessary to powerfully align action in complex organizations. Your company's mission and vision statement exists to keep everybody aligned. That's what they're there for. Ideally, your design system can take some of the heavy lifting about alignment when it comes to user interfaces. So it makes sense to actually tie the 2 together. A lot of design system teams don't actually care about the mission of their company, but if you tie them together, you actually have a more powerful sales pitch. Let's look at the mission statement, for example, on Uber's website. Anybody here work for Uber? There's going to be some free consulting. No? All right. The mission statement of Uber is, we imagine the way the world moves for the better. It's a pretty nice, ambitious, vague statement, right? The question that every team should be asking to keep them on track if they work at Uber is, how can our feature or our product that we make on this team, how can we reimagine the way that the world moves for the better? How can our app reimagine? How can our customer service team reimagine? How can our design system reimagine the way that the world moves for the better? So what do we do with that question? I mentioned I had 2 quotes that I love to share, so the second one helps to answer that. Here's the second. It is from Taoist master Lao Tzu, and it says, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. I love how Dave said this in his talk this morning. He said, design system teams are responsible for making vision happen, not responsible for making vision. Right? And that's the way that we tie those 2 things together. You look elsewhere in the organization for vision, your job as design system professionals and experts are to tie those 2 things together when it comes to building user interfaces. You want your design system to go the distance, to go the journey of 1,000 miles. Components are the lifeblood of design systems. So what is your first component going to be? You all probably had a thought in your head. I'm not going to ask you about it. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand. I want you to remember that answer. Whatever you just thought of, what's your first component going to be? Just hold that answer for a minute. Because I believe this is the single biggest misstep that I've seen with teams that leads to design system ghost towns and graveyards. This line of thinking sets design system teams off on an unproductive journey, and they fool themselves into thinking that they're doing worthy work. So what do most design system teams think is the first step in their journey of 1,000 miles, the first no-brainer component that they should tackle? I didn't say it, I didn't ask you to say it. The next line I have in my script is, I'm not going to ask anybody to raise their hands, but here we are. Take stock of whether button was the thing that you thought of. Seems obvious, right? Button, it's a simple component. Every team needs a button somewhere in their feature, probably a few. And in my experience, innocent, simple button has been the slippery slope of many design system teams. Once you have button done, you think, well, we have button, so we should probably have some general typography styles and a base color palette defined maybe, and some other basics like some form elements and headers and footers. Let's explore why button is such a terrible starting point. First, let me say, from a technical standpoint, button is a deceptively complex component. Those of you who have worked on button, you know this, right? So we're not going to go down there. I'm not going to get into that right now. Find me at the after party if you want to arm wrestle about that. We can do it. So I'm just talking strategically right now. Let's go back to Uber. Can we make a good argument for strategically how the button component helps Uber reimagine the way the world moves for the better? Now you might say, well, I mean, if we added a little animation and we showed some movement, and the key there is when your voice goes up, you're already in bad territory. What about a map component, though? I could probably make a really strong argument for how strategically the map component literally helps Uber reimagine the way that the world moves for the better. Maybe that's a better component to start with. Now, another reason that I'm convinced that button is a terrible early component is that it flies in the face of everything that I have learned from a very respected, sacred source of inspiration in my life, movies. How many people here have ever been to prison? I'm just kidding. Don't raise your hand. Don't raise your hand for that. What do movies tell us is the best and quickest way to get respect when you're the new inmate on the block? You go fight the biggest guy around.
Check out the new meat. I'm gonna slather you up in nabe and jelly. Go to town.
Let's make something clear. This one here's our booty. You want to get to him, you go through us. Or, more accurately, we go through you. I'm with them.
Now, isn't that the kind of swag and respect you want your design system team to have? See UI engineers like, I'm with them. If you go to product teams and you offer a little old button component, they're going to laugh you out of the room. What team needs another team to provide button to them? Right? No one's like, I wish there was a team at this organization that could take button off our hands. But what if you decided to take one of the most complex, nastiest, biggest, toughest, most intimidating components in the company, and you go, we got that one. That might earn you some respect. So how do you identify what components those are? Well, you ask around. There are 3 sets of activities that we put in the workbook that help you answer these quickly. The first one here is activity number 4. We're going to skip around a little bit. Can't give you all the workbook for free. Collect feature teams' roadmaps. That's the first thing that we do. Get your hands on whatever is used at your organization to plan quarterly initiatives and to facilitate conversations about prioritization. What are the feature teams at your organization planning to do in the next quarter, over the next 3 months? How are they broadcasting those plans? That's the stuff that you should start to collect. You don't have to do it in some official capacity. We often do it on like a Fig Jam. Right? We just have little areas, surface areas on a Fig Jam, and just copying links in there. Links are good. Screenshots are even better. So if you take screenshots of roadmaps, it just gives you at a glance, this is the stuff that's coming up over the next 3 months. We want to be involved in this stuff somehow. We might not know how yet, but we want to be involved somehow. Okay, next activity. The next thing you do is you interview potential design system customers. Who are the people that might use the design system, who you think could be helped by it? Right? Make a list of 15 to 20 people who you think would benefit from using the design system. Interview each person for 30 to 45 minutes and listen for stories of how product gets made, of how they make products and features. We're going to come back to the story bit a little bit later. Now, the reason that this is an important step is that it's how you avoid the slippery slope of the button component. Including the button component is an answer to a question that nobody's asking. And this is that question. What components should we have in a comprehensive design system? No one cares about the answer to this question. The honest truth of it is that the only people who care about the answer to this question are people like me who speak at conferences like this and people like you who attend them. Nobody else outside of this room really cares. A better question is, who can we help? One of my favorite answers to this question comes from author Rory Vaden. Here he is in an interview. We're going to watch a little clip of him, a very short clip. He's talking to motivational speaker Ed Milet, and he's talking about the importance of our own experiences. Let's watch.
All of us are most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were.
Oh, wow.
You're most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were. And so when you look at the problem you solve, right, it's going, what challenge have I conquered? What obstacle have I overcome? What setback have I survived?
I kept the Ed Milet reaction. Oh, he's bowled over. You see this a lot, right? Designers want to make a design system to help engineers build at a higher quality. What that really means is designers are tired of doing red lines and multiple passes of design QA. It's well-intentioned, but it's also a little bit selfish of a motivation. Designers can't help engineers if they've never seen a line of React code. Engineers can't help product managers if they think release cycles are garbage. Rory said, you're most powerfully positioned to help the person you once were. If you're a designer and the Figma tokens plugin helped you design more consistently, show other designers how to discover that new skill too. If you're an engineer and the design system's approach to composability helps you code faster, teach other engineers how to do that too. You're most powerfully positioned to help the person you once were. That's why interviews are so important. Interviews help you discover who those people are, and you go, that was me 6 months ago. And you're much more equipped to help that person. You can discover people who are on the same path that you're on, just 2 or 3 steps behind you. You went ahead of them so that their journey could be a little bit easier. That's the role of being a design system professional. All right, third activity here. Schedule product and feature walkthroughs. Track down the emails of promising teams, product owners and leads, and start scheduling some times to walk through their products with them. And this is the way that I do it with my teams. Again, very simple to capture this stuff. We use FigJam for this. You can use something equivalent. Apologies for the lack of contrast. There are 4 boxes on the screen. One says payments, one says social, one says booking, and one says flights. And these represent potentially 4 feature teams that we might talk to go like, they're probably good candidates to use the design system. So you create a surface area for each of those teams you're going to talk to. And you just ask them to walk through their product with you. Right? So let's get on a Zoom or a screen share, or if you're in the same room, you could do it too. And just walk through, have them walk through the product. And your role in that is just to listen and to write down any component you see on the screen. And they probably don't have designs yet of what the new feature or the redesigned feature is going to look like, but they might have the old one. So you could say, walk me through what's currently live, what's in production, and tell me what you all are planning to fix, what's on your roadmap. And just write down the components. I do them in stickies. Right? So just start writing down the things that I see. All right, I see it's like a tabs component in here, there's some tables, I see a slider, there's some select menus, there's pagination, there's ratings. And you just annotate. You do the same thing for each of the 4 teams. All right, and you're trying to put them in one canvas so that you could see all of them together. Then once you've talked to all the teams, Now you start to identify the things that are in common. What are the things that all the teams need, right? So an example is I highlighted those in green, right? So you separate those. Then once you have that, you can take those and pull those to another side of this fig jam, and you can start to rank these. What are all the components that everyone uses? What are all the components that probably some of them are going to use? And where you start is the top left. What does this tell you? What does this chart tell you? It tells you who is the toughest, meanest, or what is the toughest, meanest component that you should take down. Autocomplete? All right, that's the one. Everyone needs autocomplete, and it's the toughest and meanest one. So we as a design system team are going to tackle that. I think one of the primary responsibilities of a design system team is to tackle the most difficult, complex work so that it becomes easier for everyone else. Yaeli said it in her talk this morning. She said, define systems and processes so that don't need you to function. So if you can set it up for others, then they don't need you to do it for them. They don't even need them to do it for them. It happens out of the box. That's the beauty of design systems. Okay, so you decide to tackle autocomplete. We're like, we're going to knock autocomplete out. You talk to every team that's going to need it soon. You understand intrinsically that some teams will need to support an icon, for example, and some teams don't want it in there. You know what props are required and ones you're going to make optional. Before your design system team goes off to build the component from scratch, first thing you do is you look to see if another team has already built it. Don't make it from scratch. That's not your job. The product team's job is to invent new things. Your job is not to invent new things. Your job is to collect those things. Again, Yaeli said it in her talk. Design system teams should rarely start from scratch. Start by amplifying the good that already exists. Why build it from scratch? It probably exists somewhere. The difference is that all of those teams, they have built their own version of autocomplete to serve their features' needs. They didn't build it to be reusable by any other team. If you ask them to contribute their versions, that would be a problem. Right? And that's what we do generally. We go like, well, why don't they contribute it to our design system? We actually don't want that. It becomes more work that way. Amy said it earlier in her talk. For most people, it's better to spend time on their core role instead of design system contribution. She's totally right. You don't want them to contribute because it creates more work for everybody. What's faster and better for you, and also ultimately for them, is that the design system team, who sees more broadly across all of the teams and what all the teams are doing, figures out how to merge the different requirements and the options into one harmonious usage. And actually, and this is perhaps maybe my most controversial opinion of the day, is that the design system team should be the one contributing components to the design system, not the feature teams or the product teams. Contribution should come from the design system team with some help, with some collection from what the product teams are doing. And then what do you do next? Activity number 39, you usability test the heck of that out of that component with product partners. So all those teams that you were talking to, you've collected all of their things, you've mashed it into one, you've figured out what props are optional and what props are required, and then you give it back to them and you go, can you try to implement this as quickly as you can? Immediately, you test it with teams. Anybody know these guys? Yeah, this is Patrick Collison on the left and John Collison. They're brothers. They're the founders of Stripe. There is a famous urban legend in tech about these guys. It says when they first started Stripe, they would demo it for people in person. And for anyone that seemed interested, they would do what came to be known as the Collison installation. They would ask, hey, can I install it on your laptop right now? And that's what they would do. And that's how they got such immediate adoption from the beginning of Stripe. Very, very early on. They would just go like, yeah, I'll put it on your laptop right now. Let me see it. For whatever reason, our industry has this mythology around adoption. Like, if we make the perfect design system, adoption will just happen magically and automatically. People will find the system. It'll be so compelling, they will be drawn to it. They can't help but install the components in their builds. Their computers might even do it on their own. We just sit back in our design system HQ and we watch the adoption graph hockey stick up and to the right. That's not how adoption works. Getting adoption is active. We have to sell, we have to market, we have to evangelize, we have to sometimes beg, yes, beg teams to use our components. I've done it. As soon as they say they're willing, there is no time like the present. Let's get it set up right now. You have time this week? Let's get it on calendars. The team that I mentioned at the beginning of this talk that did it in 61 days, that's exactly how we did it. Followed by, we did lots of demos, followed by immediate installation with dedicated and quick iteration and bug fixes. Okay, so you're actively working with teams. You're usability testing the components with them. You're getting them implemented. You're getting adopted. It's going well. Okay, so now what? Well, now we document. But blech. hate this. Not the idea of documenting, but the word itself. It just has the connotation of it is a slippery slope. Lily said it this morning in her talk. You can't expect an organization to entirely change ways of working because you wrote that they should do it in your documentation. But isn't that how we do it, though? That's how we always write it. When we document, we write our ideals down, right? That's almost all we do. This is how it should work in a perfect world. This is not helpful to anyone. There's a scene in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince where Harry and his friend Ron arrive late to class. It's their first year of advanced potion making, and Harry tells Professor Slughorn that they don't have textbooks yet, so Slughorn sends them into the closet to go get some. Now, there's 2 books left. There's a brand new one, and there's an old, beat-up, used one. Now, Ron and Harry fight over it. Ron's bigger and stronger, so Harry gets stuck with the old one. The first assignment that Professor Slughorn gives to the class is to brew an acceptable draft of living death. It's a potion. It's like a living death. Whoever can do this will win a vial of liquid luck as a prize. Now, Slughorn says the recipe for liquid luck is on page 10 of the textbook. He also warns that only once did a student ever manage to brew a potion of sufficient quality to claim the prize. Only one student. Now, Harry discovers in his old beat-up textbook that it is labeled, which is labeled Property of the Half-Blood Prince. It is full of notes written in the margin that show how to successfully brew this potion. Let's watch the clip to see what happens next.
How did you do that?
Crush it, don't cut it.
No. The instructions specifically say to cut.
No, really.
Martin's beard. It is perfect. So perfect, I dare say one drop would kill us all.
All right, some of the shots are a little bit faint on screen, so let's look at a few of them in particular. This one here says crush with blade. Oh, thank you. Dim the lights, set the mood. This one says crush with blade, and it's pointing, the arrow is pointing to a piece in the text that says cut. And Hermione called it out, right? She's like, well, it says cut. And he's like, no, you have to crush it. And she's like, but it says cut. She's trying to follow the rules, but the rules aren't working. Harry has the advantage of having some notes in the margin that show him how to do it. It's like a cheat code. Somebody who's done it before is like, nah, you kind of got to do it this way. I think what we do with our documentation is generally we try to write reference sites and documentation like instruction manuals. We try to write it like a textbook. And reference sites aren't instruction manuals. They're actually more like historical record, or they should be. You're supposed to write down what happens and what happened when you did this, right? If you try to follow the textbook, that's cool, that's fine, but start to make notes in the margin about where the textbook just isn't right. That's the design system, not the textbook part. The design system is the notes in the margin. That's the real stuff. That's the kind of contribution that we should expect from teams. Not fully packaged components, but the stories. That's what we want them to contribute. Hey, I tried this thing, it didn't work. Okay, cool, we should make that update. Now that update is documented, right? We capture that. So I kind of prefer it like this. Instead of using the word document, which I think has the right definition, but sort of the wrong connotation, I like to use the word chronicle. Because documentation, the connotation of documentation or documenting is that can be written before you even design or build anything. In that way, it does have a more of a tendency to be a dry instruction manual. But chronicling can only happen after the fact. It can only happen after you design and build something and try to use it, and then you write, and then you journal about it. And when teams do that together, that is a very useful design system for other folks to use. I was lucky enough to be able to work with the Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty team a few years ago. They report the news in countries where the free press is outlawed or banned. This is the homepage that we built with the new design system we made together. And if we scroll down to the middle of the page, we have this area, this component, that's kind of in this dark gray here. We see this component that takes up kind of the whole screen. In our world, this design component goes by a bunch of different names. Let's do a little poll. I will ask you to raise your hands here. How many people would call this a carousel? Anybody? Okay, a few. It's called carousel. How many people would call it a slider? You call it a slider? A few people would call it a slider. How many people would call it a Fred? No takers on Fred? Oh, one person's like, yeah, obviously. That's actually what the team called this component. It's the Fred component. You could go to the website right now. I'll show you the source code here, right? So this is the rendered markup. And if I just dim out all the rest here, we've got div class equals Fred content. It's part of their design system. It's called Fred. Ask anyone at Radio Free Europe. There's no question about what this thing is called. Everyone just calls it Fred. I don't know where that started, but it continues on. And I think we're 8 years later now. They still call it Fred. And this is when I learned one of the biggest lessons in design systems that I carry with me to this day, and I share it with teams as much as I can. It doesn't matter what you agree on. It just matters that you agree. Is Fred the right name for this component? Absolutely not. But who cares? The team has clarity. It allows them to move forward. Everybody knows it is Fred. When they talk about Fred, everybody knows what they're talking about. Isn't that what we want out of names? Everybody makes such a big deal about naming. Naming is hard. No, it's not. Getting people to agree on something is hard. So don't spend a lot of time trying to find the right name for a component. Pick a name quickly and then spend all that time convincing people to use it. That's where the effort should go. That's what they did with Fred. They picked Fred really quickly and it caught on. And now everybody knows it is Fred. They have the clarity from that. Y'all know who this is? Just shout it out if you know who this is. Princess Leia, that's right. She's a character from Star Wars. Anybody heard of Star Wars? Okay. How about this? Anybody know who this is? Luke. Luke Murphy. Anybody know who this is? Darth Vader, Anakin. Oh, okay, that's good. Good detail there. Anybody know who this is? The plot thickens. Any Star Wars fans out there? Now we're going to test it. Shout it out if you know. No, good guess. Very good guess. Anybody? Some people guess Han Solo. No, it's not Han Solo. Like, it has kind of a Han Solo vibe. This is Dash Rendar. Anybody heard of Dash Rendar before? He's like a Han Solo light. He's a smuggler without care. He's a pilot of his own modified Corellian YT freighter. He is known for his ability to get out of sticky situations, kind of like Han Solo. He doesn't appear in any of the movies. He appears in, I think, one of the books or maybe a video game or something like that. And if you don't know much about Star Wars, in Star Wars there's this idea, and the idea is called canon, with one N, C-A-N-O-N. And what canon means in the Star Wars universe is it is the immovable objects of Star Wars history, characters, and events to which all other tales must align. Luke Skywalker is a canon character. He is officially part of the story of Star Wars. He's in canon. Princess Leia is in canon. Darth Vader, Anakin are in canon. Dash Rendar is not in canon. That doesn't mean he doesn't get to be in some of the stories. He's just not officially. I think that's a really useful concept in the world of design systems, is that the idea of design systems is canon. A design system is an organization's canon. And what is canon? Canon is a collection of stories. It would be good if most of these stories were official. It'd be even better if some of those stories were unofficial, even if temporarily they become official later. And to Lily's point from earlier, from her talk, it would be best if those stories didn't just reflect what is the official culture, but the real culture of design systems at your company. That's what canon should be. I shared a small slice of a combination of plays and activities from the workbook that you can run to put your design system on track or to get it back on track. So what's cool about this is that you can do this anytime, whether your design system is 8 years old or 8 days old. These are the plays that I start with when I work with a team. If they're like, we're on our 4th try with design systems, great, we're going to start here. We're starting a design system from scratch, excellent, we're going to start here. There's a bunch of other things that go with it, but generally these are the big steps. If you're discouraged about where your design system is right now, it is not too late to turn it around. Remember Abigail? Let's finish her story. Look at that. Abigail, all right. Killing it. And how did Abigail feel after all that? Well, let's ask her.
I kind of expected that stutter after I went over with the wrong foot, but I literally didn't expect to like lay out and like Superman fall. So I think I was kind of just startled, but like it was kind of more like a, you got to get back up and finish this, more than like a, oh my God, what just happened? You know what I mean?
And that is probably the best design system note that we could end on.